Have you ever looked over at a network engineer's screen, seen that rapid-fire text scrolling by and thought, wow, that looks incredibly intimidating, like literal Matrix vibes? Well, today, we're going to completely break through that illusion. The Cisco Command Line Interface, or CLI, it's not some massive barrier meant to keep you out. It is actually a remarkably powerful and highly logical toolkit. By the end of this explainer, you're going to see exactly how professionals use it to just bend networks to their will. Okay, let's dive into this. Here's our roadmap for the day. First, cracking the Cisco iOS. Then, navigation and cheat codes, day one hardening, routing and switching, and finally, we'll wrap up with the golden sequence. All right, section 1, cracking the Cisco iOS. Let's get right into it. To really understand how to navigate a Cisco device, you kind of have to think about iOS modes like security clearance levels in a highly secure corporate building, right? You don't just walk in the front door and immediately get access to the bank vault. On the left here, we have user exec mode, identified by that greater than symbol at the prompt. Think of this as the building's lobby. It's read-only, you can look around, but you can't touch or change anything. Now on the right, we have privileged exec mode, marked by the # or hashtag. This is the manager's office. Here you have full diagnostic access and the clearance you need to start making actual system changes. Let's walk through a real-world scenario straight from Chapter 9 of our source text to map out the exact session an engineer runs through when first connecting. Step 1, you land in the lobby, user exec. Step 2, you type enable and enter a password to escalate your privileges to the manager's office, privileged exec. Step 3, you type configure terminal to enter global configuration mode. Step 4 is where the magic happens, typing hostname core-sw1 to change the device's identity. Step 5, you type end to drop right back down to privileged exec. And finally, step 6, you save your work. See? It's a very logical, structured flow. Escalate privileges, make a global change, and secure it. Moving right along to section 2, navigation and cheat codes. Let me reassure you right now, literally nobody, not even a 20-year veteran, memorizes every single command syntax. It's just not possible. Instead, the pros use these cheat codes. If you're ever stuck, just type a question mark. The system gives you context-sensitive help, listing every valid keyword right there on the screen. No manual needed. If you start typing a command, just hit the tab key. The router auto-completes it for you, which saves a massive amount of keystrokes and, frankly, prevents a ton of typos. Need to repeat a complex command? Show history lists exactly what you just typed. And my personal favorite, the do command. It lets you run privileged commands, like a quick health check from deep inside configuration mode without having to back all the way out. It is a total game changer. Which brings us to section 3, day 1 hardening. Listen, before any real networking happens, before a single drop of data starts flowing, we have a mission-critical task. We absolutely must secure the perimeter of a brand new out-of-the-box switch. If you skip this, your network is compromised from day 1. Here is the exact order of operations. Step 1, set your privileged exec password. Step 2, encrypt all passwords. Step 3, secure the physical console line. And step 4, save the configuration. So the crucial point here is why this specific order matters so much. You have to run the password encryption service before you save the config to memory. If you save beforehand, your plain text passwords could actually scratch that. They will be written to the startup config, meaning anyone with physical access could just pull them. And speaking of security, check out this surprising real-world fact from the documentation. Setting up a message of the day, or MOTD banner, isn't just a polite way to greet users. The source warns that you must always include unauthorized access warning language. If you don't explicitly state that unauthorized access is prohibited, your organization's legal ability to prosecute an intruder could actually be compromised. How crazy is that? Okay, section 4, routing and switching scenarios. This is the absolute meat of the job, right? Using these foundational commands to actually connect networks. Let's walk through some of those fantastic real-world examples from Chapter 9 to show you how this is done. Imagine we're onboarding a new HR department. Because they handle payroll and super sensitive data, they need strict network isolation. We do this in 4 quick steps. First, we create VLAN 30 and name it HR. Second, we dive into a specific interface, like Gigabit Ethernet 0/5. Third, we force that port into access mode, so it only connects to end devices. Finally, we assign it to VLAN 30. Just like that, with a few keystrokes, HR is securely walled off from the rest of the company. Now, what about routing traffic between locations? If we're using EIGRP, the bring-up sequence looks like this. We enter the router process, ensuring our autonomous system, or AS number, like 100, matches everywhere. Then we set a stable router ID, we advertise our local networks, and importantly, step 4, we disable auto summary. This is absolutely critical because modern networks are discontiguous, meaning subnets are broken up and spread all over the place. If we don't disable auto summary, the router might bundle routes together incorrectly and literally send traffic right into a black hole. You know, the main reason engineers love EIGRP for internal networks really comes down to this: the dual algorithm. Dual calculates primary routes, but it also calculates what are called feasible successors. Think of a feasible successor as a guaranteed loop-free backup path that is already pre-installed right in the router's brain. So if someone accidentally unplugs the primary cable, the router doesn't have to pause and recalculate the entire network math. It just instantly switches to the backup. It gives you blazing fast convergence during an outage. There's a pretty stark contrast in how different routing protocols are used, too. EIGRP, as we just saw, is metric-based. It's built purely for speed and finding the absolute fastest path inside your own private network. But BGP? BGP is policy-based. You don't use BGP internally for speed. You use it at the very edge of your network to peer with internet service providers. BGP makes its decisions based on strict business rules and contracts, which is exactly why it's the protocol used to hold the entire global internet together. Let me pause here and pose a really common, everyday engineering problem to you. If your servers all have private IP addresses that the outside internet literally cannot see, how do we make an internal web server reachable to the public? Well, the solution, as highlighted in those Chapter 9 walkthroughs, is network address translation. Specifically, this command right here, static NAT. By typing IPNet inside source static, followed by the private IP 192.168.1.10, and then the public IP 203.0.113.50, we are creating a permanent one-to-one bridge. The router is going to automatically translate that traffic back and forth, allowing the outside world to safely access your internal server. All right, Section 5, the golden sequence. Let's take a breath, drop the rapid-fire configuration for a second, and adopt the calm, analytical mindset of a network doctor. It's time to talk troubleshooting. A professional network engineer operates on these 4 core principles. 1. Master the big 3 commands, which honestly answer 80% of all network issues. 2. Always save your work. 3. Debug with extreme care. Our source material explicitly warns to use debug commands sparingly and always with an access control list, or ACL filter. In a production environment, if you run a raw debug on a busy router, the sheer volume of logs can literally crash the device. And 4, document everything. Add descriptions to your interfaces so the next engineer knows exactly what that cable connects to. So when you connect to a broken, unknown router, you don't just guess, you run the golden sequence. These are the big 3 commands. Step 1, show version. Tells you how long the device has been running and why it last rebooted. Step 2, show IP interface brief. Gives you an instant scan of what physical ports are awake or dead. Step 3, show IP route. Reveals the router's brain, how it currently believes traffic should flow. Executing these 3 steps instantly paints a clear picture of the network's overall health. And this brilliantly illustrates the single most important rule in all of Cisco networking: copy, run, start. When you make a change, it lives in the active, running memory, but unsaved configurations are permanently lost on a reload. If you configure a massive site overnight and forget this one command, the next power blip will wipe the device completely clean, and you'll be starting from scratch. No way you want that to happen. So you now understand the CLI hierarchy, the cheat codes, the day 1 hardening process, and the golden sequence. But I want to leave you with this final provocative thought. What happens when you run the golden sequence and it reveals that the network is entirely compromised just because another engineer accidentally committed a terribly flawed configuration? How do you safely back out of a catastrophic change without losing remote access to the device? Well, that is the high-stakes art of disaster recovery. And honestly, it's exactly the kind of mystery you are now perfectly equipped to start exploring. Keep digging, keep learning, and as always, remember to save your configs.